Hi, Marty. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, beautiful. And thank you so very much for honoring the invite. It means a whole lot to me. Thank you very much, Marty. Okay, Marty, I am quite excited to have you on the show for a couple of reasons. And firstly, that is my interest in knowledge seeking. Because I believe in order to transition from a chaotic situation to that of a beautiful one, it takes the application of knowledge, quality information. And you see, Marie, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness means ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that belief of mine and that my philosophy has made this our conversation a very important one to me and even to the audience. So the second reason why I'm excited to have Marty on the show is for the sake of the audience now. I believe there are some things that that some of my audience needs to hear you say these stuff, directly from your mouth in order for them to get unstuck and experience transformation. I firmly believe that. And lastly, that is me again. I am convinced that I'm definitely going to learn one or two things from your story, insights, and experiences. So for that reason, Marty, let's get started with your introduction. Your journey. Talk to us how you got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Marty, over to you.
Sure. So I spent 20 years in the United States Navy. I was a Navy SEAL, and after the 20 years and retiring from the SEAL teams, I started managing money with the United Bank of Switzerland for about 8 years, and then I went into private business, working in a couple of corporations. About 7 or 8 years ago, I started writing books. I started with novels. So I've got 9 published novels. I'm finished, almost finished with the second draft of my 10th novel. And about 3 years, 3.5 years ago, I started writing business books, starting with a book on leadership, mostly leadership in crisis and how to deal with picking the right people, training, coaching, and mentoring people through those types of events, anticipating them if possible. My second book was about called Be Visionary. It was about strategy and thinking and dreaming big thoughts, and then how do you take that and coalesce that into a plan of action so you can achieve those big goals. And my last book, the one that's going to be released here on December 1st, Be Different, is about human creativity and innovation, and a little bit about brain science and how all of us still have the same mechanical biological capabilities to be creative at the age of 60, 70, 50 as we did when we were 6 or 7 years old.
Beautiful. The title and the content of your books, I am so glad and happy because this sounds really interesting and they're addressing very vital issue in the world. You know, crisis is actually inevitable, either we like it or not. We'll definitely experience crisis. And now getting to come across books like yours that are addressing stuff like this is actually golden. And I must say that's a good job you're doing. And I'm glad to have you on the show again. So shall we get
Thank you.
started with the questions, Marty?
Sure. Fire
Okay.
away.
I've got a couple of stories where that person got, you know, the person faced a serious crisis and in our business. And now the business went down and even the person also went down with the business. And ever since then, that person has been struggling and, how to come out of the issue. So now I want you to talk to us about the crisis mindset, you know, how to survive when there is crisis in one's business or even in one's life. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So For me, it started when I was a kid. My parents were both alcoholics, and they got divorced and kind of split the family up. My mom ended up being schizophrenic on top of being an alcoholic, and I was with my mom. My brother and sister ended up with my mom. So it was a pretty chaotic home life, or not really a home life. We were making our own meals, and we were going out and trying to get jobs to just have some pocket change. And my mom was in and out of institutions during that period. That's why I joined the Navy, was basically just to try to escape all of that. And all three of us, my brother, my sister, and myself, we all ended up coming out of that successfully. And we talked about it a little bit, especially when we were younger. And you in those situations, you have two paths when you're in the crisis. You can either succumb to it, and as you use the metaphor of dark and light, and go kind of down the dark path. Despair, lack of confidence, your self-esteem complete, is shot. And then you stay there. You can stay there and wallow there for a lifetime in some cases, right? Or you can see what's happening and decide that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to consciously make a decision to start taking one little step at a time in the right direction, in a direction where I am dealing with it, facing it, confronting it, coping with it, and coming up with ways to survive the next day and get through it. And as a kid, we didn't anticipate this stuff. This is something we had to do and decide in our own mind at the time. There weren't mentors and coaches telling us what to do. And I think in most families where you see, more than one child in the same bad situation, and some children go off and become doctors or engineers, and other children go off and become drug dealers, and you're like, but it was the same family. It's because each human has their own choice to make. So if you kind of fast forward that to business experiences, my time in the SEAL teams taught me that the way you prepare for crisis or get through crisis is to prepare for crisis, and you have to do that almost like a daily exercise. So if you were a fighter or you were a police artist, you wouldn't try to learn how to be an artist your first day on the job, and you wouldn't try to learn how to be a fighter the first time you step in a ring, because that wouldn't go well. You'd fail in both cases. So what you do is you practice. You practice the way you're going to play. You practice the way you're going to operate, the way you're going to perform. And the more you practice, you get better and more skilled. But the other part of the practice is you have to start practicing in advance failure. So if you don't ever take a punch as a boxer training, then it's going to be a surprise when it happens in the ring for the first time. No matter how good a shape you're in, no matter how many punches you've trained to throw, you aren't prepared for that moment when the world suddenly does something different. It's the same thing in life, it's the same thing in business. So in the SEAL teams, we constantly prepare and train people. We call it contingency planning. It's a lot of what if. You sit there and you kind of brainstorm amongst a whole lot of people. What if this happens? What if that happens? If we go left and this happens, how do we get out of that? How do we recover from that? And what that does is it starts to prepare your brain and kind of your emotional structure and your intellect for the unforeseeable, the unknown. It prepares you for that moment when the world takes a hard right when you thought it was going to take a hard left or go straight, and you're not shocked by it. And that at that moment, then, when you have that same choice, the path between going down the dark path or going down the light path, you tend to always go down the light path because you're prepared, and there's no sense in going this way because you knew something like this was going to happen. You trained to it to some extent. You prepared your team, you prepared the rest of the people in your business for it. And the day it happened, you knew what to do. It wasn't fun. It might have been a crisis. It may have been destructive in a lot of ways. But you as a human being and your team, hopefully, or your family, whoever you have around you, you're influencing, they know that that's the path they need to take. There isn't a second option. It's almost a foregone conclusion they have to go down that path. That's how I've learned to deal with it. It's a preparation, and it's applying things I learned in the military about preparing for combat, which is a very crisis environment. But then I've been in business for over 20 years, and the same thing happens there. I walk in every day. You never know what surprise is going to pop up. And you want everybody, rather than react and get emotional, you want them to all kind of look at each other and go, okay, let's roll our sleeves up and figure out how to fix this thing.
That's right. What you said is actually very correct because that preparation, prepare for something that you haven't seen, but it's definitely going to come. has actually been of a great help to me. You know, there was a time like that when the crisis just hit me hard, and it really touched me because I lacked that preparation. I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't prepared for it because of the insight that I took into my minds from folks who are actually ignorant. They say things like, when you're trying to prepare for something evil, then that means you're being negative. Then that means you're expecting bad thing to occur to you. So that ain't good. I took all of those things into my mind, and when the crisis came, it hit me so hard. And I'd be like, I think something is wrong with you guys' philosophy. Then not until when I sought after knowledge in God's word, and I realized that in order to stand firm when crises come, you need to prepare for it. You need to have the understanding that stuff like this is actually inevitable. It's going to come my way. So, like how you mentioned, it's just like the daily exercise and all. So, after I then came into the understanding of preparation and all of that, the next time something like that came my way, I wasn't shocked because I was actually, it came to me and it found me prepared. So what you said is actually true. It works. So that's going to lead to the second question, Marty. All right. There are these negative voices that whispers to people. I heard a story that time that a teenager wanted to write a particular book, and the voice whispered to him, negative voice, that who told you you're capable to do this? How dare you want to do something like this? What exactly think? What do you think of yourself? How do you even think they would get this book from you? Do you think people would patronize you? Do you think the solution you're trying to offer is going to work? He talked about that those voices, negative voices that was whispering, and it actually killed the dream because he said to himself, he said, I think the voices were saying the truth. Because truthfully speaking, how am I sure that these people are going to benefit from what I'm writing? He said, then he quit. So now the question is, how can we learn to manage the voices of negativity in our heads? How can we overcome this stuff?
So that was a good example too. I've now written 13 books, and I was on a podcast recently, and a lot of podcasters are also trying to write books if they haven't already written a book. And sometimes after the podcast is over, they say, "Hey, can I talk to you for a couple of minutes? How are you getting through the book process? How are you, because they're stuck, and where they're stuck more often than not is the very beginning, for all the reasons you said. Why would anybody listen to me? Why do I have, the audacity that anybody would care what my thoughts and my philosophy about a particular subject would be? So what I tell them is, are you writing a book because you want to be a multimillionaire through the sales of the book? And everybody always says no. Okay. Are you writing the book because you think what you have and what you know that you've probably passed on verbally as a teacher or a coach or a mentor makes sense, and it does have a positive impact if somebody listens and uses it? Well, yes. All right. So you want to put it now into a book form. So how many people does it matter? How many people do you want to influence? How many people do you want to communicate those thoughts and things to? How many people have you ever coached? Is it a handful? Is it 5 or 10? Was it a waste of time? Was it a waste of effort? So what if you sell 5 copies of that book? Is that enough? Is that worth the effort? Did you influence 5 people, that 5 people know something they didn't know before because they touched your skill, your knowledge, your abilities by reading your book? And almost every one of them will say, well, if just one person, if their life was changed because of what they read, that would be success. I go, well, write that book for that one person. Stop thinking like you have to be a huge bestseller or the whole world's going to have to turn around and say you're the smartest person that ever, thought about this particular subject. Write the book for that one person. And whenever you get stuck, think about that one person in your mind. Just like when you're telling people about how to be comfortable on the stage and speaking. Picture a friendly face in the crowd. Talk to that friendly face. Because once you start talking to a human being, all that stuff goes away and it's very comfortable. So that's one way of doing it, using your example. The other way, and I have a speech called "The Voices in Your Head" that talks about this. The other way is to realize those voices are going to be there for the rest of your life. It's just part of the way the brain works. So you have, a fight or flight response. It's mechanical. It's part of the biology of the brain. Back from when we used to have to make a decision whether to fight or run away when we saw a saber-toothed tiger. And it was a mechanism that would save our life. So that same mechanism is in play all the time. So when you see not necessarily a threat like a saber-toothed tiger, but if you see something that's of risk, like you have to make a decision and you're not sure what to do, your brain will start to go into those two corners. These are all the things that could go wrong. This is all the stuff that could go bad. Get away, get away, get away. Don't do this. And the other one's saying, you know what? I think I can do this. Let's attack this problem. Let's do this thing. And so you have this competition for these two kind of parts of your brain. One is trying to protect you from any risk, and the other one's trying to have you seize and take risk on and win, whatever it is. That's the fight part. So if you know that's the way your brain works, then you're not a fool and you're not weak for having those voices in your head. That's the first thing you have to understand. It's part of the human design. The second thing is when you see the voices, hear the voices, listen to them for a second and say, all right, if they're all negative, you have to take charge of that conversation. You basically have to, in your own mind, say, got it. A lot of reasons why this isn't going to work, whatever, but I've decided I'm going to do this. And so what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to think about, and what I'm going to constantly focus on in my mind is the how and the why. Why am I doing this and how am I going to accomplish it? Why am I doing it? How am I going to accomplish it? And the more you think like that, the more you become the single voice in your mind. There's one single focus in your mind. Now, every time you do something that's new or has a possible risk of failure, it's always there. I failed my instrument rating for pilot license, and I mean it was embarrassing, but nobody was watching except for the instructor. But to me, I felt embarrassed. I felt like I was, and because I had to go up and take the test again if I wanted to get the license, I started getting worried about whether I was going to do it again, screw up again, or screw up in a new way and everything. But eventually, I just had to just stop, get control of the voice in my mind, and say no. You know what you did. You know why you failed. You did everything else right. So you just got to focus on this one area. Practice. This is how I'm going to get past this. Go out and do it. And if you fail again, do it all over again. If you really want this license, that's the path. And now it's practical and it's achievable. And it may take a long time, but that's a direct path to success. And that's the way your mind should be operating. Let the voices have their little play for a second, but then override them with a positive mindset.
Very powerful. I got that. I got that. That's amazing. And that was well explained. Okay, Marty. So to bring this to an end, what would you like to leave the audience with? Like a final thought. And to those ones who would like to reach out to you, learn more about what you do, maybe get your books, and maybe you said some things that resonated with them and they'd love to learn more. How can that be possible?
Well, I think you started off in the beginning. You're talking about knowledge, and you're talking about knowledge being basically the tools that you want to use. It's the light in darkness, and that's a metaphor that's used a lot in literature. But I think it's so simple people misunderstand how powerful it really is. A lot of people are looking for an answer. It has to be a complex answer, right? And it's not. I read over 60 books a year. I I watch documentaries. I study and listen to webinars and all kinds of things that have nothing to do with my job. I listen to biotechnology, and I listen to people who've been in Sri Lanka, or somebody that did, I read books about people that went into the Arctic exploring. I read all kinds of different things because it is general knowledge, but it's also very specific knowledge about humanity. It's about struggle, it's about pain, it's about overcoming. Sometimes it's about failure, and sometimes it's about success. But the history of human beings is the history of human beings. and they've pretty much acted and operated the same way for about 10, 15,000 years. So the more you study, the more you learn, and the more you expose yourself to all this other information and outside influences and sources, the more well-rounded you get, the more you become a humanist and really understand human nature, and then the more effective you become when you communicate or you have to do what you have to do to influence human nature. And other than that, if you just go to martystrong.com, all my books are there, or you can just look me up on amazon.com.
Beautiful, Marty. Thank you. So that's going to be the end of the show. Thank you for coming and thank you for impacting us with these amazing words. It means a whole lot, Marty. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me.